Should it be a requirement that police officers should have to live where they work? I'm going to tell you my thoughts, but first I'm going to share a few stories with you. A popular comment that I've heard throughout the years on all social media platforms is that a police officer won't care about the community that they're serving if they don't live in that community, because there's no true connection there. Some people have stated that it should be a requirement for a police officer to live in the community they serve. And if they're applying for a job and they don't live in that area, then they should be weeded out, not even allowed to apply. Now, regarding the first comment about a police officer not living in the area, listen, I can understand why somebody would come to that conclusion. I don't agree with it, and I'm going to get into that, but I can understand why somebody would think that. And the second comment about not even being able to apply for a police service unless you live in the community, I don't agree with that at all. If you've seen any of my videos, you know that I often incorporate a lot of stories into my posts, okay? And this will be no exception. I've mentioned in the past, my father was a police officer. I come from a police family. My father being a police officer, and my parents, they had 5 boys, 4 of us became police officers. You should hear some of the stories around a dinner table. Listen, I'm not a young man, okay? Far from it. But even at a young age, before social media, before cell phones for that matter, it became very clear to me that it should not be a requirement for police officers to have to live in the same area that they work. Nowadays, even more so than before, police officers go through great lengths to hide their profession from people online and their neighbors. It's very, very tough to do today with technology. And if you're a police officer who uses social media, well, good luck to you, okay? It's not going to be long before your secret's out. Now, I remember being a young kid, and my dad took us into the city near where he worked. We were meeting up with a friend of his who was a police officer, surprise, surprise, and I believe we were going to a movie or something. I can't remember, but that's what's in my head. So we had some time to kill and we went to a burger joint on Yonge Street. Very well-known burger joint on Yonge Street. We'd been there before. So I remember sitting there, and there was a gentleman sitting about 3 tables away from us, big guy with a beard and everything. He was sitting facing us, and my dad was beside me facing him, and this guy was talking to himself. And he got more and more agitated, and he started swearing. And you know, when you're that age, you don't understand really what mental health even is, but kids are perceptive, and you could tell that something was wrong with this person. In my mind, that's what I was thinking at the time. Now, for some reason, my dad started talking loudly as well, and swearing. And my dad was saying things to this person. Again, they were facing each other, and this guy was repeating everything that backed out my dad was saying. But he was kind of really nodding his head at the same time and laughing and smiling as he was saying this. So as young kids, we didn't know what was happening, okay? If anything, we're scared. But my dad, in that same voice where he was speaking to this guy loudly, I mean, this guy was yelling, speaking to this guy loudly, and this guy repeating back everything my dad's saying while nodded and smiling and everything else, said, "You take 2 steps closer and I'll beat your mother effing face in." And he meant it, okay? Anybody who knows my dad knows he could have carried that out pretty easily. So this guy, thankfully, he got up and left, okay? He kept swearing at us and looking back at us, and he was loud, but he got up and left. And we were very, very, of course, happy about that. And my dad told us later that he's dealt with this person for years and that there was mental health issues. And you know what, it really is sad, but I understood that what my dad did was also important, because in a situation like that, you really have to kind of establish dominance, because, again, at a young age, we knew that this guy was going to do something. Everybody kind of knew this guy was going to do something. And that was it. My dad handled it the way it should be handled. Now, this is a very dramatic example, okay? And I started with the dramatic example for a reason. There's lots of other smaller examples I could give, and probably will, but I just want to start with that. Not every interaction is like that. But what if that happened to an officer in a small city? Or what if that happened to an officer who wasn't confident in what they could do and what they could handle? It could have been a bad situation, not just for my dad, but for us as well. Now, I grew up with my dad constantly on the lookout, constantly on watch. And it didn't matter whether we were in the city where he worked or not. It's just kind of the way he is. And many police officers are like that as well. It just became so natural to me. So that was him. And I gave an example of something that happened years ago, but now I'll bring you something more recent. When I had about 7-8 years on the job, I was walking in a mall in Toronto, Scarborough Town Centre, with a girl I was dating at the time and her daughter. And there was a kind of a big commotion. I found out later it was a gang fight. But there was a big commotion, and we heard some shots. And it was a shooting. So some of the stores were putting up the putting down the cages, locking the doors and everything, you name it. They were fairly, everybody's panicked, okay? Everybody's running. There were some people running towards what was happening and some people that weren't. So first thing, because now I'm with her and her daughter, was to, before they closed the cage, was to go into one of those stores, because that was happening, to go into one of those stores and they closed the cage and everybody just wanted to feel protected. So multiple people calling police. This was a shooting. Cops got there very, very fast, okay? For once. No, I'm just kidding about the for once. But cops got there very, very quickly. And there was police cars in the lot near the movie theater. So which is where we parked, as we were walking out there, some of the officers, of course, I recognize them. They recognize me. But some people who were arrested also recognized me walking through the parking lot. And one guy's kicking out the window and then he's yelling at me through the back window. And he looked at the girl I was with and her daughter and started swearing. Listen, I knew right there that that's not going to happen again. I'm not going to be walking about. I feel, again, I'm like my dad. I feel confident in what I can and can't do, but I'm never going to put anybody in that situation again. So there's a second example. Now, I didn't live in Toronto at the time. I didn't live in Scarborough, but it brings up a whole other set of issues. So police officers, not only should it not be a requirement for them to live in the area that they live, but should police officers with their family even be hanging out in the place where they work? Should they even be hanging out in their division while they're off duty? Because that brought a whole different set of circumstances. All right, those are fairly intense examples, okay? And they're not all going to be like that. They don't need to be like that, though. It could be something as simple as arresting your neighbor for domestic violence, arresting a neighbor for assault, theft, robbery, whatever the case is, and them knowing where you live. I know that shouldn't matter because police officers have a job to do. However, I can't tell you how many cops' cars have been keyed and everything else because they've been in those situations. And those examples are very real scenarios. And what if you have kids? I know this may surprise you, but not everybody likes police officers. And maybe you end up charging some of the kids out of school. I say kids, some of them are teenagers are telling me. For maybe now you're arresting them for assault or robbery, theft, whatever the case is. And they go to the same school as your kids go. And they know who you are. Now your kids are getting beat up. Listen, I'm not making any of this up, okay? I don't need to. Even if you live in the same vicinity as somebody and you're in the grocery store and they see you in the grocery store and next thing you know the fight's on or they follow you. You go to restaurants. I grew up this way. My dad constantly being charged and aware of his surroundings, like hyper aware of his surroundings like you wouldn't believe. Sitting in restaurants, always having, to have a clear lookout. You go to a movie theater, you got to sit in the very back because you got to make sure nobody's coming at you and you got to make sure nobody can come at you. It was nonstop. It's also happened that police services, where the officer lives, have had to have plainclothes or undercover units by their local police service sit outside their house or down the street, just kind of keeping watch because there's been very credible threats and such. Not a good situation. Now, in terms of not doing your job properly or just having you don't give a damn attitude because you don't live in that community that you work in. Now, listen, maybe in the past, there has been people who have felt that way, okay? But it's certainly not my experience with the people that I've worked with that don't live in the community. And I would have to say, by and large, I do not agree with that presumption at all. There's a lot of very good police officers out there whose dream was to be a police officer their entire life. They put that uniform on and they're just full of pride. You can see it on them. They do their job every day with integrity. And again, they're very proud to do so. Any town or city where they work would be absolutely lucky to have an officer like that. I've even worked with dozens of police officers born and raised in other countries who came to Canada in their adult years and are some of the most genuine, giving officers I've ever met, and they just absolutely love their job and their communities. You can see it in their faces. Now, I shared 2 stories with you which I was personally involved in, okay? I could give you many, many more. But because of those examples, I do not believe that a police officer should have to live where they work. It should not be a requirement at all. I'll say this though, one of the most compelling reasons I've been given about why a police officer should work where they live where they work, has to do with taxes. So in most cases, the police budget comes from the city or the town or the municipality where that police service is located. And then if an officer is drawing a salary from that city, then that officer should live in the city, and the property taxes are going to go to the city that pays the police officer. For some reason, that made a bit of sense to me. Again, there's all kinds of, there's provincial, there's federal taxes, I know that. But that reasoning just kind of, it made sense to me in an odd way. Listen, please let me know if you agree with me about everything I spoke about, or if you disagree with me. If you're a cop and you agree with me or disagree with me, please let me know. I do check all the comments, and when it's appropriate, I do respond. So thanks for dropping by. I really appreciate you taking the time. And until the next video, be safe out there, look after one another, and perhaps we will see you again.